Никакой медкомиссии не было нигде, блядь.
Никакого материального обеспечения. Ровным счетом ничего.
Putin is facing a terrifying reality. Russia has run up a budget deficit of $61 billion in just 7 months. Costs are rising in line with the pace of the war, and the budget cannot keep up. In this equation, the army is competing with the rest of the state for money. In other words, the Russian army is naked. Putin is in bankruptcy. This is not a metaphor. The Russian economy cannot keep up with the army, and the numbers are slamming this harsh reality in Putin's face. On the one side, Ukraine is constantly targeting the Russian economy's arteries, and on the other, sanctions from the West are like a long-term paralysis. As a result, the Russian army is being sent to the front, naked and without ammunition, to die.
Не могу понять, какого хуя нас отправляют на убой.
The soldiers know this. Their options are desertion, switching sides, or waiting for death. But they don't fight for Putin or Russia because they are starving and naked. While Putin is dragging the country into bankruptcy, he doesn't care about the cries of soldiers' families, economic hardship, or lives. And the Russian economy has a budget deficit of $435 billion. This deficit is now hitting the Russian army the hardest. Putin is now desperately trying to close this deficit. Priorities are being rewritten in Russia, and civilian spending is being pushed to the back burner. And this is the kind of alignment you would least want to see in a country. Let's put a quick snapshot on the table. In the first 7 months of the year, the federal budget deficit rose to 4.9 trillion rubles. That's approximately $61 billion. The annual target has already been missed by months. This is not just a number, it's the direction of the trend. Government spending has increased by 1/5 compared to the same period last year. Revenue, on the other hand, has remained stagnant. As this asymmetry persists, deficits will continue to grow. And as deficits grow, financing costs will rise. This spells a bleak future for Putin. So how long can this pace be sustained? It is clear that this pace cannot be maintained for much longer, because another indicator is flashing red at the same time. Oil and gas revenues are sounding the alarm. In June and July, there were declines of up to 1/3 year-on-year. In July, oil and gas revenues fell by approximately 27% compared to the previous year. The cumulative decline for the first 7 months is around 19%. These revenues remain the most critical cash item in the budget. The decline is directly constricting the financial lifeline. The price side is also unfriendly. Brent eased to the $66 per barrel range at the beginning of August. As prices fall, Russia's tax and customs revenues are also shrinking. Due to the strong ruble, the average ruble-denominated barrel price remains below the budget target. This is also dragging down collections. Now let's zoom out. The share of defense spending has reached one of the highest levels in history. In the 2025 budget, national defense accounts for 1/3 of the total. The ratio to GDP is approximately 6.3%, the highest since the end of the Cold War. As the war drags on, this ratio is squeezing civilian spending further. Does such a heavy burden mean that the military will find more resources despite everything? The answer is short. No, because the growth rate of the pie has slowed, the revenue side is under pressure, and financing options are narrowing. These are 3 interlocking gears. The key issue is frozen assets. The European Union and G7 have immobilized approximately 260 billion euros of Russian central bank reserves. The total global figure is estimated at around $300 billion. The lion's share is held by European custodial institutions. Access to this money is blocked, and its returns are increasingly being redirected in favor of Ukraine. As for private assets, a range of $50 to $60 billion can be used as a baseline for frozen private wealth across the coalition. The European Union alone has stated that it has frozen over 28 billion euros in private assets. Switzerland's data also completes this picture. These figures further increase the total frozen amount. Let us draw a critical line here. The frozen reserves could be released one day. However, this depends on an uncertain timeline and heavy political conditions. Therefore, from Russia's perspective, the reality today is that these funds cannot be used. Their contribution to short-term cash flow is zero. The European Union is directly transferring the additional revenues generated by these immobilized assets to Ukraine. The latest tranche amounted to 1.6 billion euros. This regular flow also impacts the war's financing equation. From the Kremlin's perspective, this represents a loss of opportunity in foreign currency. Can we consolidate all these headings into a single cost table? A cautious lower bound estimate can be made. Let's take the frozen central bank reserves at the coalition level at around $300 billion. Add the total of over $58 billion identified for frozen private assets. The sum of these two amounts to at least $358 billion. When the $61 billion deficit from the first 7 months of the year is added, the total reaches $419 billion. Note that the annual decline in oil and gas revenues in the first 7 months of 2025 has created a cash deficit of roughly $15 to $16 billion. The lower bound total comes to around $435 billion. We have avoided double counting in this accounting. Frozen reserves and private assets are stock. The deficit and revenue decline are flows. The total based on these items in separate categories provides a snapshot of today. Tomorrow's risks could enlarge the picture. Let us open a parenthesis here. This lower limit does not include indirect items such as production losses, long-term growth damage, and financing costs. Additionally, the erosion of the liquid portion of reserves and the interest burden from domestic borrowing are separate issues. When all these are added, the real economic cost rises further. Let's look at the reserve front. The liquid portion of the National Wealth Fund had dropped from $112.7 billion before the war to around $40 billion this spring. Temporary increases were observed in some months due to budget transfers. However, the downward trend persisted. This indicates that the flexibility of the fund, which serves as a cushion, has decreased. How long can the liquid portion of the fund withstand this pace? The Ministry of Finance is using foreign exchange sales from this fund to cushion the deficit within the framework of the budget rule. As energy revenues fall below target, sales will have to increase. This weakens the fund's ability to rebuild. The labour market is also sounding the alarm. Official unemployment is at a historic low, but hidden unemployment and idle capacity are rising. Migrants are filling the gap, especially in the construction, logistics, and agriculture sectors. This is causing tension. While civil authorities welcome them, security forces are taking harsh measures, accusing them of everything from terrorism to economic sabotage. Raids and deportations have become routine in some cities. As wages rise rapidly due to the war, the civilian sector is losing its skilled workforce. This is exacerbating inflation and productivity issues. According to official figures, inflation is hovering around 9%. However, it is felt much more acutely in key sectors such as food, auto parts, and construction materials. The central bank is trying to curb inflation with high interest rates ranging from 18 to 30% for borrowers in 2025. However, no legitimate business can survive under these conditions. Repaying a loan at these rates is nearly impossible. As a result, investments are collapsing. Purchases of expensive machinery, fertilizers, vehicles, and other essential goods have nearly ground to a halt. Slowdown in the private sector is evident everywhere. Small businesses are closing down in large numbers. New private projects are stalling due to insufficient financing. If the war economy continues at this pace, which areas will be cut? Social spending, investments, or an inflation cycle suppressed by monetary policy? Every option comes at a cost, and every cost returns as a political price. Another practical channel straining the revenue side is the shadow fleet. The growth of the network of old tankers used to circumvent embargoes and price caps has slowed. The US, the UK, and the EU have increased pressure by imposing sanctions on hundreds of ships and intermediaries. As this circle tightens, the netback of Russian crude oil is falling further. The EU is tightening measures such as price caps and refinery bans. Efforts to prevent products made from Russian crude oil from returning through the back door are gaining traction. This aims to preserve the discount mechanism and limit revenues. The impact is heavy but cumulative, and it is being felt on the budget side. If oil remains stuck in the $60 to $70 range, how long can the budget hold out? The downward revision of the energy revenue target already reflects this. An increase in the deficit share of GDP is inevitable. If the cycle tightens, domestic borrowing costs will act as a second brake. Messages from the US side are also increasing pressure. The statement that the Russian economy is in bad shape reflects an expectation, even if it is politically motivated. The expectation is that pressure will continue through the price channel, and that returns from frozen assets will keep flowing to Ukraine. These two channels are squeezing the budget simultaneously. Now let's look at it from the military perspective. Defense spending is at record levels. Personnel incentives, bonuses, and compensation are straining the budget. Wages in the military industry have sharply increased, generally being 2 to 3 times higher than equivalent civilian jobs. Many blue-collar specialists, particularly mechanics, drivers, welders, and machine operators, are now either working for military contractors or serving in occupied territories. Agriculture and heavy industry are suffering from a loss of skilled labor. A tractor mechanic in the Bryansk region can earn 45,000 rubles per month. The same person could earn 150,000 rubles by joining a military support unit in Donetsk. The high wages offered to meet the demand for labor are fueling wage inflation in the civilian sector. This labor distortion is also affecting sectors. As truck drivers disappear, logistics networks are weakening. Some regional hospitals are reporting longer delays in ambulance responses. The reason is not a lack of vehicles, but a lack of drivers. A sustainable balance is in question. Field realities impact the revenue side. As losses increase, personnel costs rise. As equipment consumption accelerates, replenishment costs increase. As production capacity is diverted from the civilian sector, productivity losses become permanent. The sum of these factors masks GDP growth, but pulls down prosperity. Where will the prolongation of the war lead the balance between domestic demand and investment? How can growth inflated by military production be transitioned to a peace economy? How can capacity, demand, and price dynamics be normalized? Does the political calendar allow for this? The external trade channel has also been hit hard. Gas flows through the pipeline to the EU are weak compared to pre-war levels. The northern gas pipelines are effectively out of service. Crude oil has shifted from Europe to Asia, but the discount is permanent. Every discount is a line item missing from the budget. Let us return to the discussion of the total cost. We provided a conservative range and estimated a lower limit of around $435 billion. This is the rough total of the deficit and the revenue decline by 2025. In addition to frozen public and private assets, this total could grow as risk channels activate. For example, if price caps are tightened, sanctions on the shadow fleet are deepened, or interest rates remain high for longer. The legal front is also important. European institutions are seeking more efficient ways to manage the interest income from immobilized reserves. The idea of shifting toward riskier instruments is on the table. This could increase returns but also amplify legal and systemic risks. The debate encompasses both political will and financial stability. The message within this equation is clear. Record defense spending, weak revenues, pressured reserves, and frozen foreign assets. The cost of the war is growing steadily without causing panic. This resembles the classic sugar rush, strain grind sequence. In the sugar rush at the start of the war, unused resources were diverted to production. GDP growth appeared deceptively strong, masking deeper vulnerabilities. In the strain phase, sanctions and trade disruptions hit hard. However, fiscal stimulus kept the machine running. Corruption increased as companies diverted internal resources to contract. Social spending was cut to support the military budget. The third phase is slow grinding. Core income sources, oil, gas, foreign investment, are shrinking. Deficits are growing, labor shortages are intensifying. The state is beginning to consume its own reserves and institutions to finance the war. The Russian economy has entered the third phase. In other words, the state is consuming its own institutions to finance the war. At the same time, it is relying on banks, state-owned companies, and domestic borrowing. Every step is buying time for the next crisis, but the price is being paid in interest, inflation, and the quality of growth. Now let's return to the results on the ground. As money tightens, the army cuts back on its second and third priorities. The pace of modernization slows down. Pressure increases on maintenance, repairs, and training. A long war cannot be managed with a short budget. What will the Kremlin choose in this scenario? Will it cut social spending, or will it try to print money and accept inflation? Both paths have political costs. The choice between the two will determine the rhythm of the war. In terms of external options, the solutions are limited. The China and India route does not work without discounts. The threat of secondary sanctions could make this route even riskier. The financing route is expensive, with Western markets closed. The remaining space is narrow. Let's step back and summarize briefly. The deficit is growing, revenue is falling, the defense share is at a historic high, access to frozen assets is being cut off, and the reserve cushion is shrinking. The name of this picture is simple. The free fall of the war economy. It is still manageable today. But every month, the room for maneuver shrinks. Tolerance for mistakes shrinks. And resilience to shocks shrinks. What if oil takes another hit? What if the price cap tightens further? What if there are new arrests in the shadow fleet network? Each of these three scenarios would open a new hole in the budget. If all three occur simultaneously, the resilience threshold would be reached rapidly. While the EU is accelerating returns from immobilized assets, it also intends to increase the pace of this flow. This means the opportunity cost for Russia is becoming permanent. Time is working against Russia, because every month that passes increases the cash deficit. Today's question is this: will this equation push the Kremlin to the negotiating table? The answer lies in the pace of the fiscal calendar. If deficits accelerate, reserves deplete, and borrowing costs rise, the answer could be yes. Everyone seeking to reduce risk must manage the price and sanctions channels more rigorously. In summary, Ukraine is holding its ground on the battlefield in some form. The Allied system is maintaining pressure through financial channels. Russia's economy, however, is under strain in three key areas. Cash flow is tightening, foreign reserves are locked up, the internal buffer is thinning, and defense spending is squeezing the civilian economy. Therefore, we must describe the situation without exaggeration but without hiding the facts. Based on today's data, the Russian war economy has entered a controlled freefall. Where deficits are combined with a 20% increase in spending, there can be no miracle. The solution lies either in reducing the cost of the war or reinventing financing. The latter is difficult, the former is painful but realistic. And with each passing month, the window of opportunity narrows. How much longer do you think this equation can hold? We look forward to your comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.